At 42, Jalen Thompson faced an impossible choice. Accept a promising job offer that could cover his mother's mounting medical bills or remain her primary caregiver as Alzheimer's slowly claimed her memories. After careful consideration, he made the difficult decision to hire Marilyn Reed, a professional caregiver with 15 years of experience. With her warm demeanor and impressive background in dementia care, she seemed like the perfect solution to his dilemma. But when Jalen arrived home hours earlier than expected that day, the scene between his mother and her new caregiver that greeted him would shatter his world forever. Behind the professional smile and impressive credentials lurked a monster wearing a caregiver's mask. Before we dive into this shocking story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The evening light filtered through the blinds of Jalen's home office as he finished recording his video interview. "Thank you, Benjamin, for considering my application for the position in your cosmetic factory," he concluded, reaching forward to switch off the camera. At 42, this opportunity meant more than just a career move. It could provide the additional income needed for his 74-year-old mother's increasing medical expenses. Jalen made his way out of the office and into the living room, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The soft murmur of the television greeted him as he entered. His mother, Angela, sat in her favorite armchair, her eyes fixed on the screen, but her mind elsewhere. "Mom?" Jalen called softly, approaching her. "How are you doing?" Angela didn't respond immediately. Her gaze remained unfocused and a faint smile played on her lips. She was lost in one of her dementia-induced memories again. Jalen watched as she made a motion with her hands as if holding something invisible. "This chicken sandwich is delicious," Angela murmured, her voice dreamy. "Don't you think so, James?" Jalen's heart clenched. James was his father's name. He had passed away years ago. Jalen watched quietly as his mother took another imaginary bite, lost in a memory of sharing dinner with his father at their favorite theater. Her face glowed with contentment as she carried on her conversation with the empty space beside her. Recognizing the far-off look in his mother's eyes and the eating motion she was making, Jalen understood her silent cue for hunger. He had learned to read these subtle signs over the past few months, adapting to the new reality of caring for a parent with Alzheimer's. "I bet it is, Mom," Jalen said gently, playing along with her delusion. "How about I make us some dinner? Would you like that?" Jalen gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze before heading to the kitchen. As he walked, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: love for his mother, worry about her condition, and hope that this new job opportunity would provide the financial stability they so desperately needed. As he finished preparing the meal, Jalen's gaze fell on the dining table. It was a family heirloom, its surface worn smooth with age and memories. His fingers traced a faint puppy sketch he had drawn as a child, miraculously preserved through the years. The table had been the center of so many family gatherings, holidays, and everyday meals. Now it served as a silent witness to the changing dynamics of their small family. "Mom," Jalen called out, setting the plates on the table. "Dinner's ready. Come on over." He walked to Angela's chair and gently helped her up. As they made their way to the table, the smell of the freshly prepared food seemed to ground Angela in the present. Her eyes focused, and a spark of recognition lit up her face. "Oh, Jalen," she said, her voice clearer than it had been all evening. "This smells wonderful. Thank you, sweetheart." Jalen's heart swelled with love and relief. These moments of lucidity were becoming rarer, and he cherished each one. They sat down together, and Angela's eyes widened as she saw the grilled chicken cheese sandwich on her plate. "How did you know?" she asked, a hint of wonder in her voice. "I've been craving this all day." Jalen smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I just knew, Mom. I just knew." Angela's eyes welled up with tears. "What would I do without you?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the familiar flavors seeming to further anchor Angela in reality. As they finished their meal, she looked up at Jalen with a questioning expression. "Jalen, dear," she began, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration, When is that caregiver coming? The one you showed me yesterday? Jalen was surprised by her recollection. It was a good sign that she remembered their conversation from the previous day. Actually, Mom, she should be here any time now. Our appointment is at 7 p.m. Angela nodded. Good, this is the right decision, you know. You need to take that job Benjamin offered you at his cosmetics factory. Jalen sighed. Working away from home means I'll have less time with you during the mornings. I'm worried about leaving you alone. Angela reached out and patted his hand, her touch warm and comforting. It's okay, son. You need to do what's best for both of us. I'll be fine with the caregiver. You've always taken such good care of me. But now it's time for you to think about your future too. Jalen felt a wave of relief wash over him at her words. Her support meant everything to him. Before he could respond, the intercom buzzed, startling them both. Hello, this is Marilyn. A woman's voice came through the speaker. I'm here for the caregiver appointment. Jalen stood up, giving his mother a reassuring smile. That must be her. I'll let her in. He pressed the intercom button. Hi, Marilyn, please come up. We're in room 1104 on the 11th floor. A few moments later, there was a knock at the door. Jalen opened it to find Marilyn standing there, looking exactly as she had in her profile photo. She was neatly dressed in a crisp blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. In her hand, she carried a small hospital bag, likely containing supplies from her previous job. Hello, I'm Marilyn Red, she introduced herself with a warm smile. It's nice to meet you in person, Mr. Thompson. Jalen shook her hand, noting her firm grip. Please call me Jalen. Come on in and meet my mother, Angela. As Marilyn entered the apartment, Angela called out from her seat at the dining table. Hello there. You look just right, not too young. I bet you have a caring heart. Marilyn's smile widened as she approached Angela. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. I hope we'll get along well. Jalen watched the interaction closely, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Marilyn seemed professional and kind, but entrusting his mother's care to a stranger was still daunting. He gestured for Marilyn to join them at the table. Let me give you a thorough orientation, Jalen began, his voice taking on a serious tone. My mother has mid-stage Alzheimer's. She has good days and bad days, and it's important to be prepared for both. I've compiled this notebook with all the information you'll need, Jalen said, sliding a thick, well-worn notebook across the table. It has her daily routines, preferences, dietary needs, and specific responses that might help calm her during an episode. Marilyn listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. She repeated key details back to Jalen, demonstrating her attentiveness and understanding. I want to assure you both, Marilyn said, looking between Jalen and Angela, that I have extensive experience working with Alzheimer's patients. I'm comfortable handling sudden changes in behavior and will always prioritize Angela's safety and comfort. I usually send midday photos to family members as proof of care, especially during medication times. Would that be something you'd like, Jalen? Before Jalen could respond, Angela chimed in with a mischievous grin. Only if you promise to take beautiful pictures of me, dear. I was quite the looker in my day, you know. The tension in the room broke as all three of them laughed. Jalen felt some of his anxiety dissipate, watching as Marilyn easily engaged with his mother. After dinner, Angela insisted on helping with the dishes, moving toward the sink with the same determined stride she'd had when Jalen was a child. At first, her movements were methodical, normal, the way she'd washed dishes thousands of times before. The warm water ran over her hands as she tested the temperature, a lifetime of household routines guiding her actions. Then something shifted. Her posture changed subtly at first, a slight stiffening of her shoulders, a tilt of her chin. The transformation was beginning. Jalen recognized the signs, watching as his mother's reality began to slip away from the present moment. The water needs to be hotter, Angela muttered, but her voice had taken on a different quality, higher, more defensive. Her hands moved faster now, almost frantically, as she adjusted the tap. I know how to wash dishes properly, been doing it long enough. Then, in an unsettling shift, her entire demeanor changed. Her back straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice had transformed into something harder, cruel, mimicking the blonde head chef from her painful past. "Your kind can't even do the simplest job right," she sneered at an invisible person, her face contorted with borrowed contempt, a perfect mirror of decades-old discrimination. Just as quickly she was herself again, younger and vulnerable. "I've been washing dishes for 20 years, she protested, her hands trembling as she scrubbed at a plate. "Never had any complaints before you came." The switches between personalities became more rapid, more fluid. Angela's body swayed slightly as she alternated between roles, each transition marked by subtle but distinct changes. The angle of her head, the set of her shoulders, the tension in her hands. Marilyn, noticing the change in Angela's demeanor, approached. "Mrs. Thompson," she called softly, but Angela didn't respond, lost in her memory. To Jalen's surprise, Marilyn's voice suddenly changed, becoming harsher. "Your kind can't even do the simplest job right," she said, mimicking the chef's voice from Angela's memory. For a moment, Jalen was shocked and offended. He grabbed Marilyn by the shoulder, but she patted his hand in an assuring way. Jalen quickly understood Marilyn's strategy. She was aligning herself with Angela's altered reality, a technique often used with Alzheimer's patients to calm them during episodes. Playing along, Jalen stepped closer to his mother. "Don't listen to her," he said gently, pretending to be a fellow kitchen staff. "You're doing a great job, Angela. Don't let her get to you." The combination of Marilyn's and Jalen's approach seemed to work. Angela's tense posture gradually relaxed, and her eyes began to focus on her surroundings once more. She looked down at her hands, still wet from the dishwater. "Oh," she said, blinking rapidly. I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me." Jalen wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It's okay, Mom. Why don't you sit down and rest for a bit?" As Angela settled into her favorite chair, Marilyn approached with a glass of water and Angela's evening medication. "It's time for your pills, Mrs. Thompson," she said kindly. After Angela had taken her medication, Marilyn turned to Jalen. "The pill bottle is almost empty," she informed him. "You might want to get a refill soon." Jalen nodded, grateful for her attentiveness. "Thanks for reminding me. I'll go get it now. The closest pharmacy that carries her medication is about a 15-minute drive away, so it might take me some time." He turned to Marilyn. "Would you mind getting my mother ready for bed while I'm gone? You can head home after she's asleep. There's no need to wait for me to get back." Marilyn nodded confidently. "Of course, I can handle that. Don't worry about a thing." Relieved, Jalen knelt beside his mother's chair. "Mom, I'm going to get your medicine, okay? I'll be back soon. Marilyn will help you get ready for bed." Angela smiled at him, patting his cheek affectionately. "Such a good boy, always taking care of your old mother. Go on, I'll be fine." Jalen leaned in, placing a warm kiss on her forehead and cheeks, before enveloping her in a tight hug. "I love you, Mom. I'll see you in the morning." As he headed out, Jalen couldn't shake a slight feeling of unease, but he pushed it aside, reminding himself that Marilyn was a professional and that his mother seemed comfortable with her. With a final glance back at the apartment, he stepped into the elevator, hoping that this new arrangement would be the solution they needed. The soft glow of the bedside clock pierced the darkness of Jalen's room, its digital display reading 5:50 a.m. His eyes fluttered open, consciousness seeping in before his alarm had a chance to sound. For a moment he lay still, the weight of the day ahead settling over him like a heavy blanket. Reaching for his phone, Jalen saw a message from Benjamin. "Looking forward to giving you a tour of the factory today. See you soon." A mix of excitement and anxiety bubbled in Jalen's chest. This was it, the start of a new chapter, a chance to secure a better future for himself and his mother. Yet the thought of leaving Angela with a new caregiver, even for a few hours, sent a ripple of unease through him. Quietly, Jalen slipped out of bed, careful not to make any noise that might disturb his mother's rest. When he reached home last night from the pharmacy, Marilyn had left the apartment, and her mother was fast asleep in her room. When he checked on her, he saw her usual blanket was on the bathroom floor, and her expression was etched with tiredness, and dried tears creased her lids. Probably from one of her earlier scenes, he thought. Jalen padded softly to his bedroom door, easing it open and stepping into the hallway. The apartment was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of early morning traffic filtering through the windows. As Jalen approached the kitchen, intending to start the coffee maker, he was surprised to see a figure squatting in front of the open refrigerator. It was Angela, her nightgown hanging loosely on her thin frame, muttering to herself as she rummaged through the shelves. "Mum?" Jalen called softly, not wanting to startle her. "What are you doing up so early?" Angela didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was laced with confusion and a hint of frustration. "I ordered toast and coffee. Where's my order? This isn't what I asked for. You people can't even brew coffee." Jalen's heart sank as he realized his mother was caught in another memory, likely from her days as a customer at the cafe where she once worked. He approached her slowly, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, it's okay, you're at home. How about I make you some toast and coffee?" Before Angela could respond, the intercom buzzed, startling them both. Jalen glanced at the clock. It was barely 6:15 a.m. Who could be calling at this hour? He pressed the intercom button. "Hello?" "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. It's Marilyn. I hope I'm not too early, but I wanted to get a head start on the day." Jalen hesitated for a moment, thrown off by Marilyn's unexpected early arrival, but given Angela's current state, perhaps it was for the best. No, that's fine. Please come up." A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Jalen opened it to find Marilyn standing there, looking fresh and alert despite the early hour. She took in the scene before her, Jalen in his pajamas, and Angela still standing by the open refrigerator, and immediately understood the situation. "I see we're having an early start," Marilyn said with a warm smile. "Why don't you get ready for work, Jalen? I can handle things here." Grateful for her quick assessment and willingness to take charge, Jalen nodded. "Thanks, Marilyn. I'll be quick." As he headed to the bathroom, a mix of relief and guilt washed over him. Relief that Marilyn seemed capable of handling the situation, and guilt at the thought of leaving his mother in someone else's care. Jalen showered and dressed quickly, his mind racing with thoughts of the day ahead. When he emerged from his room, fully dressed for his first day at the factory, he was struck by the scene in the kitchen. Angela was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen, her knees drawn up to her chest. She was biting her fingers and picking at her nails, a habit she'd developed in the later stages of her Alzheimer's. Her eyes were unfocused, staring off into the distance as she muttered something under her breath. The same racial comment she'd been fixated on earlier. "You people can't even brew coffee." Marilyn knelt beside her, a syringe in hand. Jalen's heart skipped a beat when he noticed a bruise forming on his mother's forehead. How had that happened in the short time he'd been getting ready? "What's going on?" Jalen asked, his voice tight with concern. Marilyn looked up, her expression calm but serious. "Mrs. Thompson had a bit of an episode and hit her head on the floor. I'm about to administer her morning medication. Don't worry, I've got everything under control." Jalen hesitated, torn between his instinct to stay and help his mother and the knowledge that he needed to leave for work. As if sensing his indecision, Marilyn spoke again. "What are your plans for today, Jalen? Your first day at the new job, right?" Jalen nodded, his gaze still fixed on his mother. "Yes, I'm supposed to tour my friend's factory today, but maybe I should stay." "Nonsense," Marilyn said firmly. "You need to go. I've studied the handbook thoroughly, and I assure you I have everything under control. You don't want to be late on your first day, especially with the morning traffic." Jalen knew she was right, but leaving felt wrong. He knelt down beside his mother, gently taking her hand. "Mum, I have to go to work now. Marilyn will take good care of you, okay?" Angela didn't respond, still lost in her own world. Jalen leaned in, placing a warm kiss on her forehead, careful to avoid the bruise. He kissed both her cheeks and gave her a tight hug, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair. As he stood to leave, Marilyn called out, "Oh, and Jalen, give me a heads-up message in the evening before you get home. That way I can have everything prepared for the night." Jalen nodded, grabbing his keys and wallet. With a final glance at his mother, still huddled on the kitchen floor, he stepped out of the apartment. As the door closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. But he pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the day ahead and the opportunity it represented. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt longer than usual, each floor passing slowly as Jalen's mind raced with thoughts of his mother, the new job, and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As he stepped out into the cool morning air, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever the day might bring. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the factory complex as Jalen and Benjamin completed their tour. Their footsteps echoed through the pristine production floor, where rows of sophisticated machinery gleamed under industrial lighting. Benjamin's large, muscular frame moved with surprising grace between the equipment as he gestured enthusiastically at various workstations. "So here's the thing, Jalen," Benjamin said, his deep voice carrying naturally over the ambient hum of machinery. "Starting salary is $5,200 a month, and that's before overtime. Plus, full medical benefits kick in after 90 days. He paused by a control panel, turning to face his friend. "And with your logistics background, I can easily see you moving up to shift supervisor within 6 months. That's another 1,000 on top." Jalen's mind immediately started calculating. The extra income could cover Angela's Don Pezzle, which had recently jumped to $380 per month, plus the new memory care program Dr. Mitchell had recommended. "That would make a real difference, Ben," Jalen admitted, following his friend toward the shipping area. "Mom's entering mid-stage now, and the medications keep getting more expensive. Last month, they added memantine to her prescriptions, and our insurance only covers part of it." Benjamin nodded, his expression sympathetic, but with an underlying firmness. "Look, I get it, family's important, but I need to be straight with you, Jalen. This position needs someone who can be here consistently. The morning shift is non-negotiable, and we sometimes run overtime when orders spike." He placed a heavy hand on Jalen's shoulder. "The money's good, but you've got to be all in." "I've hired someone to help with Mom," Jalen explained quickly, feeling the pressure. "A professional caregiver. Started today, actually. She seems really experienced with Alzheimer's patients." "That's good," Benjamin replied, his tone measured. "Because while I want to help you out as a friend, I'm also running a business here. We've got strict production schedules, major contracts to fulfill. I can't have someone ducking out early or calling in because of family emergencies." He softened his words with a smile, but the message was clear. They pushed through the double doors into the parking lot, the tension hanging between them like the humid afternoon air. Benjamin was offering a lifeline, but it came with strings attached, strings that could pull Jalen in directions that worried him. "I know you'll make it work," Benjamin said, his voice warming again as they approached Jalen's car. "You always do. Just remember, this opportunity could solve a lot of your problems, but only if you're ready to commit fully." "You're right," Jalen agreed, managing a small smile. "It's just going to take some getting used to." "I've got your back here," Benjamin assured him, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Don't hesitate to call if you need anything." As Jalen settled into his car, he felt a mixture of hope and apprehension wash over him. The job seemed perfect, and Benjamin's support meant the world to him. Looking at his phone one more time, he studied the photos Marilyn had sent, trying to find reassurance in these digital glimpses of his mother's day. The image of Angela at the park seemed peaceful enough, and the chicken wrap looked appetizing. Most importantly, the medication photo suggested Marilyn was following the care instructions precisely. Yet something nagged at him, a subtle unease he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the natural anxiety of change, or perhaps the protective instinct of a son who'd been his mother's primary caregiver for so long. Whatever it was, Jalen pushed the feeling aside as he started his car. reminding himself that change, even positive change, often came with its share of worries. The elevator ride up to the 11th floor felt interminable. Jalen's mind raced with thoughts of the day, the tour of the factory, Benjamin's encouragement, the photos Marilyn had sent. Yet, as the elevator climbed higher, an inexplicable sense of unease grew within him. As he approached his apartment door, keys in hand, Jalen's steps faltered. From within, he could hear muffled sounds, distressed cries that were unmistakably his mother's voice. His heart rate spiked as he made out her words, repeated over and over in a heartbroken tone. "My family is gone, and my husband is dead, and my son is gone too." Alarm coursed through Jalen's veins. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking as he struggled to unlock the door. After what felt like an eternity, the lock finally gave way, and he burst into the apartment. The scene that greeted him was worse than he could have imagined. Angela was slumped in her chair at the dining table, her face pale and tear-stained. She was visibly distressed, her body trembling as she continued to mutter about her lost family. It was clear she was trapped in a dementia-induced memory, likely reliving the pain of her husband's funeral. Marilyn stood nearby, looking flustered and unprepared. Her eyes widened in surprise at Jalen's sudden entrance, and she quickly tried to compose herself. "Mr. Thompson," she stammered, "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." Jalen barely registered her words as he rushed to his mother's side. "Mum," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "Mum, it's me. I'm here. You're not alone." As he tried to comfort Angela, something on the table caught his eye. In front of his mother was a plate filled with what looked suspiciously like dry pet food. The sight made Jalen's blood run cold. "What is this?" he demanded, turning to Marilyn with a mix of confusion and anger. "What have you given her?" Marilyn's response was casual, almost dismissive. "Oh, that? It's just a chocolate cracker. Angela requested it herself." Jalen's suspicion deepened. His mother had avoided chocolate for years due to a dietary preference. Something wasn't adding up. "Chocolate? Mum doesn't eat chocolate, and this doesn't look like any cracker I've ever seen." Marilyn's demeanor shifted slightly, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Well, you know, small amounts of chocolate can actually be beneficial for Alzheimer's patients. It's good for brain health." The explanation sounded rehearsed, unconvincing. Jalen's instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. He picked up one of the crackers from the plate, bringing it closer for inspection. The smell hit him immediately. It was unmistakably dog food. Fury rose within him, hot and sudden. "This is dog food," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been feeding my mother dog food. What the hell is wrong with you?" Marilyn's facade cracked for a moment, surprise and something darker flashing across her face, before she schooled her features back into a mask of professionalism. "Mr. Thompson, I assure you, it's just a chocolate treat. You're overreacting." But Jalen wasn't buying it. He stood up, towering over Marilyn, his voice rising with each word. "Overreacting? You're feeding my mother dog food and lying about it. What kind of sick person does that?" As the confrontation escalated, Angela's distress seemed to increase. She curled in on herself, her cries growing louder. "My family, they're all gone. I'm all alone." Jalen's heart broke at his mother's words, fueling his anger further. He turned back to Marilyn, his eyes blazing. "Did you even give her medication today? Or was that a lie too?" Marilyn's composure slipped further, her tone becoming hostile. "I've dedicated years to caring for patients like your mother. You have no right to question my methods." The blatant disregard for his mother's well-being pushed Jalen over the edge. Methods? Feeding an Alzheimer's patient dog food is not a method, it's abuse. Where are her medications? What else have you been doing to her? As Marilyn tried to sidestep the question, making excuses and deflecting blame, Jalen noticed her eyes darting towards her hospital bag. Suspicion flared within him. "Open your bag," he demanded. "Now." Marilyn's refusal was immediate and vehement. "That's my personal property. You have no right." But Jalen had had enough. He moved towards the bag, determined to uncover the truth. Marilyn tried to block his path, but Jalen was faster. He grabbed the bag, upending its contents onto the table. What spilled out confirmed his worst fears. Among the usual caregiving supplies were several bottles of medication, some belonging to his mother, others with unfamiliar names. It was clear that Marilyn had been hoarding drugs, likely from other patients as well. The revelation hit Jalen like a physical blow. All the trust he had placed in Marilyn, all the hope he had for this arrangement, came crashing down around him. He turned to confront her, but Marilyn was already backing towards the door, her face a mask of defiance and barely concealed panic. "You don't understand," she spat, her earlier professionalism completely abandoned. "People like her. They're a burden on society. They don't deserve—" Jalen cut her off, his voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. My mother is not a burden. She's a human being who deserves care and respect." As Marilyn continued to spew hateful rhetoric, Jalen realized the full extent of her prejudice and cruelty. This wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate abuse motivated by bigotry. With trembling hands, Jalen pulled out his phone and dialed 911. As he explained the situation to the operator, describing both the mistreatment of his mother and Marilyn's suspicious behavior, he kept his eyes fixed on the caregiver, silently daring her to try and leave. Marilyn, realizing the gravity of the situation, made one last attempt to excuse herself. "This is all a misunderstanding. I should go—" "You're not going anywhere," Jalen said firmly, his voice low and dangerous. "You're going to wait right here until the police arrive, and don't you dare try anything on me." As they waited in tense silence, broken only by Angela's continued distressed murmurs, Jalen's mind raced. How could he have been so blind? How much had his mother suffered because of his decision to trust this woman? The sound of sirens in the distance brought a small measure of relief. Help was coming. But as Jalen looked at his mother, still trapped in her distress, he knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The trust that had been broken today would not be easily repaired. The sharp rap of knuckles on the apartment door cut through the tense atmosphere like a knife. Jalen, who had been standing guard to ensure Marilyn didn't try to flee, moved swiftly to answer it. Two police officers stood in the hallway, their expressions serious as they took in the scene before them. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," Jalen said, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. He ushered them inside, gesturing towards Marilyn, who stood rigid by the dining table, and then to Angela, still huddled in her chair, muttering softly to herself. The female officer, her nameplate reading Martinez, approached Angela with a gentle demeanor. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can you tell me your name?" Angela looked up, her eyes unfocused and confused. I'm Angela. Where's my family? They're all gone." Officer Martinez exchanged a concerned glance with her partner before turning to Jalen. "Sir, can you explain what's happened here?" Jalen took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "I hired Marilyn as a caregiver for my mother, who has Alzheimer's. When I came home today, I found her feeding my mother dog food and withholding her medication. There's more. I think she's been stealing drugs from other patients too." The male officer, Officer Chen, turned his attention to Marilyn, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, is this true? We're going to need to search your belongings." Marilyn, her earlier bravado crumbling, stammered out a weak denial. "This is all a misunderstanding. I would never—" "Save it," Officer Chen cut her off. "We'll get to the bottom of this. Where's your bag?" Jalen pointed to the hospital bag on the table, its contents still spilled out. Officer Martinez began carefully cataloguing the items, her face growing more serious with each pill bottle she examined. "There are at least 4 different prescriptions here," she said, her voice low, "and only one matches the name Angela Thompson. Care to explain this, Ms.?" "Red," Marilyn supplied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marilyn Red." As the officers continued their investigation, Jalen knelt beside his mother, gently taking her hand. "Mom, it's okay. I'm here. You're safe now." Angela's eyes seemed to focus for a moment, recognition flickering across her face. "Jalen? My boy. You're here?" "Yes, Mom, I'm here," Jalen said, fighting back tears. Officer Martinez approached them, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Thompson, we're going to need to take Ms. Red down to the station for questioning. Do you have your mother's prescription information? We'll need to verify which medications are hers." Jalen nodded, reluctantly leaving his mother's side to retrieve the necessary documents. As he handed them over, he couldn't help but ask, "What's going to happen now?" Officer Chen, who had been securing Marilyn's wrists with handcuffs, looked up. "We'll need statements from both you and your mother if she's able. Ms. Red will be charged with theft and elder abuse at the very least. There may be more charges once we investigate further." As the reality of the situation sank in, Jalen felt a mix of relief and overwhelming guilt. He watched as the officers led Marilyn out of the apartment, her head bowed in defeat. With Marilyn gone, Jalen turned his attention back to his mother. He knew her medication schedule by heart and realized with a pang that she was long overdue for her evening dose. "Officer Martinez," he called out, "is it all right if I give my mother her medication now? She's missed her evening dose." The officer nodded, her eyes softening with sympathy. "Of course. We'll need to take the other medications as evidence, but please take care of your mother." Jalen moved quickly, retrieving Angela's rivastigmine skin patch from the kitchen cabinet where he always kept it. With gentle hands, he applied the patch to her upper arm, murmuring soft words of comfort as he did so. "There you go, Mum. This will help you feel better soon," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As the medication began to take effect, Angela's agitation slowly subsided. Her breathing evened out, and her muttering ceased. Jalen stayed by her side, holding her hand and watching for any signs of distress. Officer Martinez approached them once more. "Mr. Thompson, we'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. For now, focus on taking care of your mother. Here's my card if you need anything or remember any additional details." Jalen took the card with a nod of thanks. As the officers prepared to leave, he felt a strange mix of emotions washing over him. Relief that Marilyn had been caught, anger at what she had done, and an overwhelming sense of guilt for not protecting his mother better. As the door closed behind the police, leaving Jalen alone with Angela, he knew that the road ahead would be challenging. But looking at his mother, now resting peacefully thanks to her medication, he made a silent vow. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe and cared for, no matter the cost. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen as Jalen stood before it, his mind racing with the events of the day. The police had left, taking Marilyn and the evidence with them, but the apartment still felt charged with the lingering tension of the confrontation. Jalen's eyes scanned the shelves, searching for something, anything, that might bring comfort to his mother. And to himself. His gaze landed on a package of chicken breasts, and suddenly he knew what to do. With practiced movements, he began pulling ingredients from the fridge and pantry: chicken, rice, collard greens. The familiar routine of cooking grounded him, providing a much-needed sense of normalcy in the chaos of the day. As he worked, Jalen could hear the soft murmur of voices from the living room. The police had left an officer behind to take pictures of the apartment, documenting the scene for their investigation. The quiet click of the camera served as a grim reminder of what had transpired. Jalen's hands moved almost on autopilot, seasoning the chicken with a blend of spices his mother had taught him years ago. The smell of sautéing onions and garlic filled the air, slowly replacing the lingering scent of tension and fear. Angela looked up from her seat on the couch, her eyes clearer now that her medication had taken effect. "That smells wonderful, dear." Jalen's heart clenched at her words. Even amid this nightmare, his mother's moments of clarity were a precious gift. As the chicken sizzled in the pan and the rice steamed, Jalen's mind wandered to the future. How would they move forward from this? Could he trust another caregiver after what Marilyn had done? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Finally, the meal was ready. Jalen carefully plated the food, golden brown chicken nestled against fluffy white rice, with a generous serving of vibrant green collards on the side. He carried the plates to the dining table, where Angela was already seated, watching him with a mixture of hunger and something that looked like pride. "Here you go, Mom," Jalen said, setting the plate before her. "Careful, it's hot." Angela's eyes lit up at the sight of the meal. Without waiting, she picked up her fork and began to eat, her movements quick and eager. Jalen watched with a mix of relief and concern as she devoured the food, realizing with a pang of guilt how hungry she must have been. "Slow down, Mum," he said gently, reaching out to pat her back as she nearly choked in her haste. "The food's not going anywhere." Angela paused, looking up at him with a sheepish smile. "I'm sorry, dear, it's just so good, and I was so hungry." The admission hit Jalen like a physical blow. How long had Marilyn been neglecting his mother's needs? How much had Angela suffered in silence? As they continued to eat, Jalen noticed a change coming over his mother. The medication he had administered earlier seemed to be taking full effect, helping her regain her bearings. Her movements became more controlled, her gaze more focused. "Jalen," Angela said suddenly, her voice clearer than it had been all day, "there's something I need to tell you." Jalen set down his fork, giving his mother his full attention. "What is it, Mom?" Angela took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "That night you went to buy my medicine. Marilyn, she threatened me. She choked me on the bed, told me if I said anything to you, she'd do something terrible. She said she'd hurt you so you couldn't work again." Jalen felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The fork he had been holding clattered to the plate as his hand went slack with shock. "Mum, why didn't you tell me?" Tears welled up in Angela's eyes. "I was scared, baby, so scared. And then this morning, when she came early, I think she wanted to make sure I didn't have a chance to talk to you." The pieces were falling into place now, the bruise on his mother's head, her distressed state when he had returned home. Anger, hot and fierce, surged through Jalen, but he forced it down. His mother needed him to be calm now. "She hit me," Angela continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's where the bruise came from, and she gave me too much medicine, made me feel drowsy all day. That's why I looked so calm in that picture at the park. In the afternoon, she didn't give me my medicine at all. She kept telling me you were dead, Jalen, over and over." Jalen moved around the table, enveloping his mother in a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, but you're safe now. I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again." But Angela, displaying the same strength that had carried her through decades of challenges, through loss, discrimination, and now illness, squeezed his hands reassuringly. Her eyes, though tired, held a clarity that surprised him after such a traumatic day. "No, son," she said, patting his hand. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. There's nothing to forgive. You were doing what you thought was best for both of us." Her voice stronger now. Jalen looked at his mother, marveling at her resilience. Even after everything she'd been through, she was still trying to comfort him. "Mom, Now, you listen to me, Jalen. What that woman did was wrong, but that doesn't mean you should lose faith in people. There are still good folks out there who genuinely want to help." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Don't lose faith in people because of one bad soul. What happened today was terrible, but it doesn't mean you should give up on your dreams or the job at Benjamin's factory." Jalen shook his head, tears threatening to spill. "But how can I trust anyone else with your care after this?" "Because we'll be more careful," Angela replied with quiet determination. "Because we won't let one person's cruelty stop us from living our lives. Remember what your father used to say. The world doesn't get better by giving up, it gets better by getting up." Her mention of his father sent a wave of emotion through Jalen. Here was his mother, after everything she'd endured today, still thinking of his well-being, still encouraging him not to let this setback derail their plans for the future. Her resilience amazed him. "I just need to be more careful," Jalen said, reaching for his phone. "I'm going to message Benjamin, and ask him if I can delay starting until we find someone we can really trust. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he composed the message, explaining the situation and requesting some time to make proper arrangements for Angela's care. Angela watched him, a mix of pride and concern in her eyes. "You're a good son, Jalen, but don't put your life on hold for me. We'll figure this out together, just like we always have." Jalen sent the message, then set his phone aside. He turned to his mother, taking both her hands in his. "I promise, Mom. I'll always make sure you're safe and cared for, no matter what." Angela's eyes welled up with tears, but her smile was radiant. "I know you will, sweetheart. You've always been my rock." As the evening light faded, casting the room in soft shadows, Jalen remembered something. He reached into his bag, pulling out a magazine he had picked up on his way home. "I got this for you," he said, holding out the crossword puzzle book. "I thought you might enjoy it." Angela's face lit up at the sight of the magazine. "Oh, Jalen, you always know just what I need, thank you, dear." She took the magazine, flipping through its pages with interest. After a moment, she looked up at him, her expression softening. "Would you mind helping me get ready for bed? I'm feeling a bit tired after all the excitement today." Jalen stood immediately, offering his arm to help her up. "Of course, Mom. Anything you need." As they made their way slowly towards Angela's bedroom, Jalen felt a sense of peace settling over him. The day had been a nightmare, a betrayal of trust that had shaken him to his core. But here, in this moment, with his mother's hand on his arm and her unwavering love surrounding him, he knew they would be okay. In the quiet of the evening, as he watched his mother sleep peacefully, Jalen made a silent vow. He would do whatever it took to protect her, to ensure she received the care and respect she deserved. And though the day's events had shaken his faith, he held on to hope. Hope for a better tomorrow, hope for the right caregiver, and hope for the strength to navigate the journey ahead.